Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2023 film Quicksand. It's a Shudder exclusive and it's coming to Shudder Friday, July 14th, so you can check it out then. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, this is called Quicksand. It's about quicksand. So if you're going into it and thinking, man, it sounds like people being stuck in quicksand is going to be stupid, maybe you don't want to watch this movie because that's primarily what it's about. But most people, you probably know what you're getting into. But I will say off the bat, overall, I didn't love the film. I liked it enough. So that'll be reflected in my rating, obviously, at the end. But this is my no spoiler review since it's not on Shudder yet when I'm putting this out. Let's get into talking about Quicksand a little bit without spoilers. Directed by Andres Beltran, who also did Undercover Law, Bad Days, Savage Rhythm, and Primate, just to name a few. Written by Matt Pitts, who wrote some episodes of the show Fringe, Revolution, Zoo, and also some episodes of Westworld. So for people who want to know what kind of writing pedigree that is, someone who does know what they're doing. This is a Colombian film that's actually filmed in English. So in the beginning, there are some subtitles because it is in Spanish. But just know that it's not all like that. It's primarily just the very beginning of it that's done that way, and then they switch over to just using English language. So for people who don't like to read subtitles, you're covered, you're good. Again, Shudder exclusive, coming Friday, July 14th. Quick synopsis. A couple on a trip to Colombia go out into the wilderness, get stuck in quicksand, they have to survive. That's basically all you need to know. And that's probably everything that you would assume based off the title of the film. So think about a movie kind of like Open Water, which this film felt a little bit like to me personally. I didn't like Open Water, but I did like Quicksand more than Open Water. So I will say that much. So if you liked something like Open Water, where it's kind of like people isolated in a bad situation who can't like get to land easily, and they need to figure out how to survive and other things happen. If that sounds good to you, this will be a film that you'll enjoy. So I would check it out in that case. The scene before the title card of this is okay. I was actually expecting there to be more of like a hook put into the audience just before the title card, because that's something that a lot of horror films have been doing with that opening scene, and it does it to a degree. That's why I said it's okay. It just didn't like make me sit forward in my seat. I think it's partially because it's like, well, you know what you're getting. Like, there is this kind of like impatient feeling for me of like, okay, let's just get to the quicksand, because we all know it's going to the quicksand because of the title of the film. Now, if the title of the film was something different, maybe you wouldn't feel that way, or I wouldn't feel that way. I'm not saying that everyone would necessarily feel that way, but yeah. Leached color palette alert. This is something that I've been talking about recently because it seems like almost every horror film is going with a leached color palette, very drab. So if that's something that's problematic for you, it's just an aesthetic thing. Just know it's in there. It's just something that bothers me slightly. It doesn't kill a film. I just think as like a whole, the fact that we're doing this so much in film, I'm like, come on, man. It's not a great time. Let's have something different. Let's go for some vibrancy. Let's have that be the movement of the color palette we use. Like nice, bright, and warm. And I feel like that stands in contrast very well with horror. You know, think something like Midsommar. Very bright, very vibrant, but it's very horrific at the same time. Anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox on that one. There's a good amount of bickering between characters, especially in the beginning of the film. It gets old fast. So the two main characters, the married couple, lots of bickering, lots and lots of bickering, and like you get it, and you can get what they're trying to get in other ways, other than just having constant bickering that just gets to be super, super tired as you continually hear it. Because there's not a whole lot you can do with just bickering. It really does early on get to a point where you're just like, I understand, I know what's going on between these two people. It's been very well established. You don't need to beat this dead horse. So that's one of the things I did not like about the film. They did do a solid job shooting it. So obviously Beltran knows what he's doing as far as direction goes, and the cinematographer knows what they're doing as far as capturing shots that look good. It looks like it was probably pretty challenging to shoot because, you have to shoot people in quicksand. So you probably have to get pretty low to the ground in that sense. So it feels kind of cramped and claustrophobic, which is really interesting because they're in a forest. Like, there's a lot of space around them, so it is extremely spacious. But they do a good job of kind of like keeping the shots pretty tight on them, which translates well to making the audience kind of feel like how like trapped and claustrophobic the characters are probably feeling. So I like that aspect of it. I think they really kind of nailed that. The storyline that leads to the quicksand is believable, so that's good. Once again, could have done without all the bickering, but we get there. Excuse me, sorry about that. So that's good. It's not just like, and quicksand, and you're just like, this doesn't make any sense. So they in a believable way, get you to that quicksand. Once you're there with the quicksand, you really do wonder how it's going to stay interesting. Because it's a bit interesting when you're kind of introduced to the characters in the beginning. They're setting up the premise of the story, then they get stuck in it, and you're like, oh my gosh. And then you start thinking, okay, now they're in the quicksand. Now they're going to be here for a large chunk of the film, probably. So what are we going to do? So I will say I think they came up with enough extra stuff to be added into it that does keep it quite interesting. So just know that this film's not going to get super boring at any point. At least I didn't feel that way. There are moments where it feels like it hits like a little bit of a pacing lull, but it's not too bad overall. I'll talk a little bit more about that, I think. There's some physics here that actually don't make a whole lot of sense. There's something relatively early on that happens once they get into the quicksand that I was like, physics-wise, I don't really think this would be happening. It's a small part of the film, though. It's just kind of one scene, really. And then the film moved on, and I moved on, because it's enjoyable enough. The acting's pretty good. I do think that the two main characters, who you see for the majority of the film, did quite a good job. I mean, everyone, the entire cast, because there are other characters, the entire cast did a pretty good job. But you really do need the two main characters to sell what's going on, obviously. And they did a pretty good job of picking those people because what's going on does seem believable. They are able to emote properly and their conversations are good and all that jazz. Emotion. They show the emotion well. Around the hour mark of the film is when things get most interesting, I will say. That's when things really kicked up a notch. Now, this film is like an hour and 25 minutes long with credits. So when you hit the hour mark, you only have probably about 20 minutes left in the film, but that's fine. That's totally fine because at that point it really kicks up and you're just like, ooh, here we go. Prior to that, still interesting. There's some decent character development that goes on in the film. You would think a film like Quicksand, we're not going to get a whole lot of character development, but honestly, a pretty decent amount of character development that goes into this, which I feel like you definitely did need in order to help keep people's interest. The other thing is when you have people in a situation like this in a film, you need to get your audience to really care about what's going on so that everything that ends up happening, they're kind of like on the edge of their seat. If you don't care about the characters, then, there's not really going to be any like suspense or dread that you end up feeling. The ending is a bit too drawn out, I will say that. For the most part, pacing pretty good, which is interesting for a film like this. The fact that the pacing was pretty solid for a Quicksand movie, there is some achievement there for sure. But the ending, in my opinion, was too drawn out. I understand what they were doing with that, and there is kind of a purpose to it, but they needed to cut it down. Not a lot, but, cut that ending down just a little bit, and pacing would have been a lot better. Feels similar to the movie Open Water, like I already said. It's like open water on land, or inland, kind of, because of quicksand, But yeah, this movie does a good job of reminding people to be cognizant of what and who you have in your life before it's too late to enjoy those things or those people. Now, I'm not saying that to say that there's, necessarily deaths or not deaths. I'm not confirming anything on that front. I'm just saying that me personally watching this film, seeing those people stuck in that situation and feeling what the filmmakers were trying to get you to feel in that situation really made me start thinking something like this could happen to people. It also made me think about the submersible thing that happened recently with Ocean Gate. And yeah, I mean, you just never know. So like, appreciate what you have, appreciate who you have. And yeah, so it really made me think about that. But overall, this film was solid enough. Out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm going to give it a quite solid 3-star rating. Honestly, I don't think that a film about quicksand, you're necessarily going to be able to get a really big rating, because you're not going many places. You'd have to do a lot with the script in order to get a much higher rating. It's just kind of how it is. But hopefully people find this film and enjoyed this film. If you've already seen it, go ahead and put a comment down there. Tell me your thoughts on it. Or if you want to, go watch it now. Come back, comment on this, and we can talk. Always looking for differing opinions, so let me know your thoughts if you loved it, if you hated it, in between on it, whatever. And just like give me a sentence or two, because I'm not a fan of when people are just like, liked it, didn't like it. I want a little bit more out of you. Give me a little bit of why, even just one thing. So we appreciate that. And I would also appreciate if you'd hit subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Join this nerdy horror community that I'm kind of creating here so I can interact with all of you, because where I live, I can't really talk to anyone at a nerdy level about horror. So that's why I do this channel primarily. Also hit the notification bell button, then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos, which I'm doing 3 a week at this point. Sometimes 4, on an occasion 4. But regardless, thank you for checking out this video, and until next time, keep it brutal.